Hi, everyone, and welcome to Team Agreements, the Circle of Influence. We started off this masterclass yesterday and had so much technical difficulties that I decided to go ahead and re-record. So for those of you who joined me yesterday, thank you. If you're back again, I know there's a lot of things that you get to re-listen to and think through again. For those of you who are listening on the replay, welcome and welcome to our VIP page. So glad you could join us and get to check it out. If you're not a VIP member already, then all you need to do is just click on the emails as they come in and you'll automatically get added to the list. Love to see that you're here. So again, if you're new or not quite sure what's going on, my name is Deidre Harris and I am the founder of Team Agreements. And normally I don't go through my whole resume, so I'm not going to do that. You can see all of the things that I've done over the past 30, 35 years. But why I bring this slide up, especially at the beginning of every class that I do, is because I want people to understand, one, the things that they're experiencing is not just with them or their program or in their neck of the woods, that when it comes to working with teams, we're all experiencing a lot of the same issues, concerns, problems. And I've seen them no matter of when I've worked in Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific or with clients all across the country and now even internationally as well. So again, welcome and welcome. If you're not familiar with team agreements, here's what we do. We actually are a training and coaching company, but we're dedicated to leadership development. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that we focus on things like leadership refinement, and that's where we're going to spend most of our time today. But in addition to that, we also do vision alignment, bringing groups together, teams together, so they're going in the same direction, working on the same things. We also do things around highly effective teams. What does that look like? And not only what does that look like, but we take people through exercises so that they can see, what does it mean to be a really highly performing team? And where do they fit on that continuum? And what can we do to close the gap? Also, what we do is a lot of effective communication and mutual accountability. So we go in and we look at our roles and responsibilities and we make agreements and we figure out, how are we going to honor those agreements as we go forward throughout the school year. Last but not least, we do a lot around cultural humility because we know our culture impacts everything we do, we think, we say, believe. And so we want to raise our awareness around that and use that awareness to again increase our communication effectively with the rest of our team members. So that's a lot of what we do, again, all around leadership, regardless of whether we're talking with teachers, paras, assistant teachers, directors, principals, we work with the whole group. Today's session, though, we're going to work on specifically on the idea of stress because there's just been so much going on lately and it's actually been ongoing. So we're going to revisit this. We're going to do that through some interactive exercises, and some of them are going to be talking about what are things that we have influence over and what are things are out of our control and what can we do about that. We're also going to be exposed to some things like Jack Canfield's equation, and I'll tell you more about what that looks like in a minute, and the power of emotional intelligence. So when we come back and we build those muscles within ourselves, what is the impact on that on our stress and how we can increase our productivity and lower the impact of stress on our body. So here we go. For those of you who have joined me before, you know that I love playing the game Just Like Me. And for those of you who are new, this is a game. It's very, very simple. Again, if you're watching on the replay, here's how you're going to do it. I'm going to list a series of statements about how we might have felt this last week. And when you hear a word that sounds like, oh my gosh, this was me, you're going to write an exclamation point on the paper. Now, if you hear a feeling and it was really, really like you, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to write two exclamation points on the paper. Now, if you're really, really, really feeling this way or have felt this way this last week, you're going to go ahead and write in 3 exclamation points on the paper. Okay, so here we go. If in the last week you felt overwhelmed, go ahead and write in those exclamation points. And I know when we did this live, this was a big one. We had people with 1 and lots of 2s and 3 exclamation points. What about exhausted? Have you felt exhausted? Write in that 1, 2, or 3 exclamation points. What about frustrated or disappointed? Go ahead and write in those exclamation points. What about incompetent? Anyone felt incompetent over the last week? Like they just didn't know what to do or wasn't sure if they had it in them. Yes, absolutely. Write in those 1, 2, and 3 exclamation points. What about unproductive or demoralized, resentful, outraged, unworthy, insecure? Yeah, I can see you writing those 1, 2, or 3 exclamation points, and I get it. And the idea here isn't to go ahead and actually get you depressed, but it's to raise our awareness about what are those emotions that we're feeling and to know that we are not alone, especially what's going on right now, whether it has to do again with the political unrest or with COVID, the mandates that are going on, the confusion. We are all in this place. And typically, what happens when we're feeling this way is we can feel a loss of control or not, or feel disempowered. And so we want to give you some strategies about how to move out of these feelings and into that sense of calm, as well as that sense of, I do have control here and what it looks like. So here we go. We're going to start with our first exercise, and this is called the circle of influence. And what you can do is you can either download the journal if you haven't already, it's right next to you, you can just click on it, or you can just grab a piece of paper. You're going to need paper to go through the masterclass with me and write down your thoughts as we go along. Okay, so grab a piece of paper, pause, grab a piece of paper, or download the journal. And here we go. So I want you to make a list of what would make for a really good day, like what that good day looks like. What had to happen for that day to be defined as good for you? And then I'm going to ask you to do the same thing for a bad day. What does a bad day look like? And I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to go ahead and write a list for your good day as well as your bad day. Okay, so don't forget you want to write a list of what a good day looks like, what a bad day looks like, and I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds to do that. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Now, if you're not done, no worries. Go ahead and press pause here. Finish writing your list, hit play, and we'll pick up where you left off. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do next. From your list of a good day, I want you to choose 3 things that if it could happen every day, it would be great. And you can either, put a circle around those three things, or you can highlight it or underline it or put a check mark next to it, just some way to identify those three things. So go ahead and choose those things from your good day list. And then when you're done with that, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing with your bad day list. Go ahead and choose, let's go back. Go ahead and choose, there we go. Go ahead and choose three things from your bad day list that is pretty much the same thing. Oh, we keep losing that here. Okay, there we go. Again, underline, circle, check mark, highlight. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. And the next thing I'm going to ask you to do is to place the three items from your good day list into the circle where you think it fits best. So for example, you choose one item that you've highlighted so far, and you ask yourself the question of, do I have full control over this particular thing? And if you do, you're going to put it in that middle circle, the circle of control. Now, if you don't have control over that thing, you're going to put it in the outer circle, the circle of concern. It's out of your control, so it's circle of control, circle of concern. And you're going to do that for the three items for your list. And then you're going to do the exact same thing for the three items from your bad day list. If you have full control over it, put it in the middle circle, circle of control. If you don't have control over it, then go ahead and put it in the outer circle, the circle of concern. And if you're done and we have a few more seconds, add, a couple more from your list, your good day or your bad day list, or both. Now, here's what some of you might find is that there actually might be some things that you from your list and you say, well, actually, I have some control over this thing. Or it's like, I have part control over this thing, or some days I have control and some days I don't. And if that's the case, we're going to add a third circle, and we're going to put it between the circle of control and the circle of concern. And we're going to call that the circle of influence. And that's where you're going to put those items. So again, if you have something from your list where sometimes you have control and sometimes you don't, add a third circle and call that your circle of influence. Or if you have something from your list and you're not sure how much control you have over it, put that in under the circle of influence. Now, I want us to stop here for a minute and just reflect. What do you notice? Take a look at your circles. Now, some people might notice that they have many of their lists in their circle of control and not so many in their list under circle of influence or circle of concern. Other people might notice that they have a lot more things listed in their circle of concern or their circle of influence and not so much in their circle of control. And others might notice that theirs are spread throughout. So once you've had a chance to reflect and just look and see where your list is falling, here's where we're going to go. I'm going to have us watch a short little video that talks about circles of influence, concern, and control, and some strategies for helping us rethink the way we're perceiving those things that we're identifying as, being part of a really bad day or being part of a really good day, and what we feel like we have control over and what we don't feel like we have control over. So here we go.
What is your circle of influence? If you have to go to the shop to get milk and it's raining, don't worry about the rain. Just take an umbrella or go later. You can control your actions picking up an umbrella or doing it later, but you can't control the rain. Same if you have a test tomorrow. Instead of worrying what questions will be asked, just repeat the section you were studying. Most of the things in our lives will fall in one of the following circles: circle of concern or circle of influence. One of the big things that people try to control are other people. I think that is one of the most popular and at the same time most terrible things to do. Why? Because people don't like and don't want to be controlled. I have seen it at work and personal life over and over again. Things happening in your circle of concern are not getting you anywhere. Things like worrying about weather, discussing how bad traffic was this morning, worrying about how long it takes to upload this one file, worrying why someone does something in different ways than you would do. And no, they don't get you anywhere. These things actually harm you in many ways. Considering these things or thinking about them will make you feel frustrated, angry, and helpless. And you are helpless because you'll never be able to directly influence them. You just don't have control of them. Let's look at another example. You have to do your Saturday shopping to buy products for next week. So you go to the store, do the shopping. Then you go to the cash register and you end up in a long queue. And here it starts. Oh my God, this will take ages to get through. At least 20 minutes of my time wasted. Why don't they have more tills in this shop? Why don't they have self-checkout machines? And moaning goes on in the shop, and by the end of the day, everyone who met this person will know his or her bad shopping experience. As we can see in this example, why there is no more tills or self-checkout machines illustrates a person thinking outside their circle of influence, and all it does in life is just beat the person up with no reason. Let's look at the situation from a bigger picture and analyze this situation deeper to see if there was anything this particular person could do within his or her circle of influence to avoid or differently approach this situation without complaining and upsetting themselves. A. Timing. If you went down to the shop on Saturday afternoon, then that is not a surprise that the shop was crowded because it is rush hour, and everyone does shopping during this part of the day. In this case, the solution would be to pick a different time to go shopping. Either go in the morning or at the end of the day when there's less people shopping. B. Other shopping center. Because you went to the central shopping center, you run into the crowded place. The solution would be to go to another shopping center, to the one which is a little bit further away. I know what you'll say on this one. Because I know from my own experience, when I get used to the one store, it is not easy to break that habit when you know where each product is located, what you buy each week, or the store sells your favorite product, and so on. But nonetheless, of all of these excuses, the choice was there. C. Utilize that time. Do something useful during the time you have to wait in the queue. We live in an age of technology with smartphones in our pockets. Check out your mailbox while waiting to pay the bills, but don't moan all the time. For example, I always have some audiobook with me on my phone. So if the situation comes where I feel I can't do anything else useful, I can always listen to my audiobook and think in this case it is an ideal fit. If you have to wait in queue 20 minutes, then you might as well listen to an audiobook during that time, and that is going to be a well-spent 20 minutes. So here, we concluded 3 things or actions within every person's circle of influence. One additional thing I want to point out here is that planning in advance and thinking things through before doing them are playing an important role. Planning can help you to stay more in your circle of influence. Even if we look back to our sample, the first 2 things had to be approached in advance, and that can be done only if you plan and organize things. To be honest, If we look around, we will quickly realize that there are more things that can't be controlled and influenced than the things we can. And this is true. It might sound unfair, but that's just the way it is. There's one thing you have 100% control and influence of, and nobody else has it. And it is you, your body. Thoughts and your actions can only be controlled by yourself. So in my opinion, this is the best place to start from as we talk about circle of influence. We have to start within ourselves. Being in your circle of influence means doing things you can do and not complaining or worrying about things
that you can't. So I apologize that the clip got cut off early there. So here's what I'm going to ask us to do. I want you to go back to your circles and your list. And after seeing the video, what would you change? Knowing that you can't impact things like the weather or, more importantly, other people, because we all wish we could. We really have 100% control over just ourselves, our body, our thoughts, our actions. One of the strategies that they gave us was about planning and organizing. How would that impact or move any of the things out of the circle of influence to the circle of control, or out of the circle of concern into the circle of influence? Go ahead and take a look and move those things where it makes sense. I'll give you a minute to do that. So again, we can sometimes feel like we have no control, but this exercise shows us that in fact we have more control than what we think. So as we go through the rest of the day, think about what you can truly control. And here's what we also know, that we know that there are still going to be things that are out of our control. And so what I'm going to ask us to think about is, what items are you still feeling a lack of control about? Go ahead and circle those. They'll probably be in your circle of concern list still. Okay, have them circled? So here is the next exercise. And this comes from a man called Jack Canfield. Many of us know Jack from his Chicken Soup for the Soul series. There's a different series. There's even one for educators or teachers. So he's been around, the series has been around for a very long time. But the exercise that I'm going to talk about now actually comes out of his book, The Success Principles. And here's what he says. He gives us an equation to think about. And that equation is called E plus R equals O. So what does that mean? Basically, the event plus our response equals the outcome. And I have another short little video clip with Jack explaining it, and it's probably about maybe 1 minute long.
I'm writing this whole thing about a formula called E plus R equals O, that there are events that occur in your life, and then you have a response to that event, and then you get an outcome. And what most people do when they don't get the outcome they want is they blame the event. They blame the government, the weather, their parents were alcoholics, their boss is a jerk, whatever it is. And what we're seeing is that people need to realize that the only thing that's going to produce a better outcome, more of what you want in life, is by changing your response, because the event's not going to change. And so we have to change our thinking, we have to change the pictures we hold in our head, we have to change our beliefs, and we have to change our behaviors. And when we do that, then we can start producing different outcomes.
Okay, So I love listening to Jack talk about this because what he's saying is that the event could be anything. It could be our feeling, it could be a coworker's comment, it could be the traffic, it could be a misunderstood email, and of course, it could certainly be COVID. But what we want to do is think about understanding our response. And this is where the action comes in. And this is where we actually get to make more choices. And sometimes those choices are going to be minute by minute, meaning how we respond to each event. So I want to stop us for a second and just iterate here that this is not about how you respond in the past. So although that could be some, constructive information, because depending on the outcome, we may or may not want to do that again. But it's really about how we're choosing to respond in the moment or in the future. This becomes our choice point. This is where we have full control. And so there's going to be three components to our response. Again, our thoughts, our emotions, and our behavior. And too often we start by trying to change our behavior before we've gotten our thinking process lined up. So understanding our common emotional triggers, for one, what tweaks us, what gets us going, what gives us upset, can give us a blueprint for how we typically respond to certain events. What's also important to understand about this is that we need to be 100% willing to take responsibility for those thoughts and those actions, um, and what we do, our responses, right? So for many of us, this can be a real challenge because often we want to actually blame somebody else, and we see this all the time. For example, we might say something like, "I can't believe you made me mad," or "Look what you made me do." Those things are we're actually attributing our actions, right, or our emotions to someone else when they're actually ours. We're in 100% control and responsible for them. And so this is why this simple little formula packs such a punch. To implement it successfully, we're going to have to be completely honest with ourselves and reappraise our beliefs and our deeper values and the feelings that will enable us to respond differently, like empathy, confidence, optimism, courage, and calmness, just to name a few. Now, here's the thing, since we're always getting those outcomes, and usually it's without applying any conscious thought, this formula gives us at least a better opportunity to shape the outcome to what we do want. So when we look at, again, this, this simple equation, this is where we know that you can't change the events that take place in your life, but you can change our response to the events to create the outcome that is going to be feel better, or result in a better event or outcome for you, one that you would like to happen or get closer to. So again, here's where I'm going to ask you to think about your list. Okay, go back to the circle of concern, or you can go to any of them, but typically we'll start with the circle of concern because that's where we feel like we have no control whatsoever. And I'm going to ask you to go ahead and put in those changes, or I'm not sorry, put in that equation to see what changes can happen. So the event is the event. We can't go past and change it. It's done. We don't have control over time. But if we could think about a different response to that event, what outcome might we have gotten differently? So go ahead and write that down for yourself. I'll give you a minute to do that. Okay, so I'm going to have us go forward. Again, if you're not done or you want to spend more time here, just go ahead and hit pause. And when you're ready, hit play and pick up from where we left off. So this is where I want to take us through just a quick review. So we talked about our good days and our bad days, and we put our list into the circle of control or the circle of concern. And if we weren't sure or sometimes felt like we had a little bit of control, we put it in the circle of influence. And then what we did is we watched a movie talking about how we can't control things like the weather, or we can't control other people. But what we do have control around is our bodies, our thoughts, and our actions. And by using strategies such as planning or organizing, doing things ahead of time or being proactive, there actually are a few things that we can put more into our control. The other thing that we then talked about was Jack Canfield's principle around E plus R equals O, or event plus response equals the outcome. And that even on those things that we feel we have no control over in terms of the event, we are finding that we still have 100% control over how we respond to that event. And so we still have influence over the outcome. And so when we think about that, here's a question that I want us to move into and think more about. And that is, if changing our behavior, for example, by doing some planning, or right, or being proactive, or changing our response is all it takes to get a different outcome, how can we begin to do it quicker, sooner, or faster? And this is where we're going to spend the rest of our time today. I'm going to talk to us about our emotional intelligence, right? And about increasing it and thinking about it as a skill set or even a muscle that we get to develop and refine. It's like SEL, right, for adults. And one of the things that we know is that, um, let's see, I'm going to bring all of these up, is that when we talk about social emotional intelligence, we're talking about pretty much 5 areas. So that first one is self-awareness. And this is simply the ability to be aware of one's inner life. So our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors, our values, our preferences, our goals, our strengths, our attitudes, our mindsets, and so on and so forth. And how each of these things impact our behavior and our choices. So we just spent the front end of this masterclass in self-awareness. We thought about what actually makes up for a good day and a bad day. We took ourselves through an exercise of putting it into circle of control or influence or concern. We watched 2 different videos that gave us strategies on how to not only be aware, but to move into action and allow us to make choices that will impact the outcomes. But not only that, give us a better sense of control. So we've done a lot of that already. One of the other things that comes up under emotional intelligence is the understanding of empathy, or the ability to understand how others are feeling, which is critical to emotional intelligence. But it involves more than just being able to recognize the emotional states of others. It also involves our responses to people based on this information. So, for example, if you were to sense that somebody is feeling sad or, upset or hopeless, how would you respond? So some of us might treat that person with extra care or concern, or others of us might try to make them feel better, right? Lift their spirits, maybe make them laugh. So being empathetic allows us to understand the power dynamics that influence those social relationships, especially in workplace settings. So it becomes really important for guiding our interactions with different people that we encounter throughout the day. So that next one is about self-care. And self-care is about setting really strong boundaries, including our work-life balance, taking care of our health and our fitness, helping people to understand what's important to us, right? And what's a non-negotiable, those things that we're not willing to do or not willing to tolerate. So really, really important. And so when we talk about things like boundaries, it's not just about taking care of ourselves and understanding, but it's also holding firm to those boundaries. So if we put something in place and we say, something's non-negotiable. For example, I will not text or receive calls after 10 o'clock in the evening, that unless it's an emergency, I'm not going to, respond to a text or answer, a phone call if it's after 10 o'clock, because then it sends mixed messages. So self-care is really, really important, and it can be really challenging to hold the line, so to speak. Now, one of the other things that we get to talk about is self-management or self-regulation. And this is the ability to navigate and shift our thoughts, our emotions, and behaviors in a healthy way in order to make decisions and reach those goals that benefit ourselves and others. So this is where we're going to be spending some of the rest of our time today, is talking about that. It also includes expressing our emotions appropriately. So, because here's the thing, for those people who are really skilled in self regulation, they tend to be more flexible, they adapt well to change, and they're also good at managing conflict and diffusing tense or difficult situations. So, in terms of self regulation or self management, before we can, think about, oh, I wish somebody else would, or why can't they do this, then we actually need to be thinking about the ways that we can go ahead and regulate ourselves. The last one that we get to talk about is social skills. And having strong social skills allows people to build meaningful relationships with other people, right? Both personally and professionally, as well as developing a stronger understanding of who we are with those people. And so when we talk about social skills for adults, we're talking about things like active listening, verbal communication skills, nonverbal communication skills, as well as persuasiveness, right? How do we help get people to, think or at least see our point of view? So, as we're thinking about this, I want you to stop for a minute and ask yourself some of these questions. Can I recognize the things that trigger me? Do I blame others for my feelings? For example, you make me so mad. How good am I at practicing self care and self compassion? Am I conscientious and take responsibilities for my own actions? Or do I say things like, you made me do this? How often do I reflect on how my actions impact others? Do I sustain healthy boundaries and advocate for myself? Do I develop strong rapport with both the leaders who I work with and my coworkers? How well do I adapt to change? And How accurately do I interpret different situations, especially the ones where there might be power dynamics? For example, with people who may be in charge or in control. And as we answer and think about these things, these are what will allow us to understand where we stand in terms of emotional intelligence. So, as I mentioned, we've talked about self awareness, and we're going to spend a few more minutes just talking about self regulation. So, let's go back for a minute. Okay. So, here's the thing, we're all going to receive stress. And the stress can be both internally as well as externally. So let's talk about what I mean by that. And that is, we've all heard the adage, neurons that fire together wire together. And I wanted to bring this up because we're all predisposed to negative events. I mean, this is how, through evolution, we've come to be hardwired, meaning that we've learned, or our brains have learned to scan the environment for anything negative that would harm us. This is how we've learned to survive. It's also a part of our hindbrain, right? The back of our head. It's the oldest part of our brain. It controls our fight, our flight, and freeze responses. So basically, our brain is tuned to patterns. What we look for, we will find. So, why this is important? Well, let me give you an example of a study that was found that when people watched just 3 minutes of news a day, they were predisposed to perceiving that day as bad by like 20 something percent. So let me say this again, by watching, listening, or reading to things like news. And when we're talking about news that's telling us all of the things, bad things that are happening in the world on a regular basis, we are literally training our brain to listen for and find bad things, especially when we're doing this first thing in the morning, because we're setting our brain up to look for those things for the rest of the day. And because we're training our brains to find negative things, what is it going to do? Absolutely. During the course of the rest of the day, what's going to happen is that we're going to be looking for those negative things. And what we look for, we find. And so a lot of times our perception of our bad day is because we're picking out those negative things. And if we're having so many negative things, we tend to think of it as just that negative day. So one thing to think about is we're going to have stress. It's going to be in our lives because there are going to be things that we're not able to control. And so having said that, having said that, one of the things we want to know is that not all stress is bad. In fact, most life-changing events come with stress. And so here's where we get to move into another exercise that talks about decreasing or reducing the impact of stress. Now, one thing to remember, that stress is in the eye of the beholder. What stresses us doesn't necessarily stress out others. And while we can't necessarily reduce our stress, what we can do is reduce the impact of stress on our bodies. So here's a great exercise. I want you to stop here for a moment and write 3 events in your life that were meaningful. So any 3, it could be professional, it could be personal. Go ahead and write 3 things in your life that were meaningful. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressful was each of these events? Okay. Now, I want you to think about that. Don't go on to number 3 just yet. I want you to think about that because for many of us, we have these really wonderful events in our lives that were also really um, stressful. So again, not all stress is bad. The difference here is the meaning that we attribute to the event. So what they've found in research is that when we look at an event and we can say, this is meaningful, then even though the stress remains, it doesn't reduce the stress. What happens is that the impact of that stress on our body gets reduced. So we end up with things like less tension headaches or things like less body aches, right? Or sore muscles, right? Or clenched jaws or upset stomach, wherever you tend to hold the stress in your body. So this is a really great strategy for us to think about again, is that when there's this event that's truly out of our control, we're not able to be proactive or plan around it, that it just is what it is, attributing meaning to it. What were a benefit that we might have gotten out of it? Or what is something we could learn from this? And it might be something to learn not to do the next time, that when we attribute meaning, it actually impacts or reduces the impact of stress on our bodies. Now, once you've done 1 or 2, I want you to go back and let's look at number 3. What other high stress event can you attribute meaning to? So remember what I asked you this week, if you felt any of those, negative emotions previously? Go back and think of an event that led to that emotion. Is there meaning that you can pull out? Some benefit that you would have gotten from that? If yes, awesome. I'll give you a minute to go ahead and think about it. So again, if you're not done, go ahead and press pause. And when you're ready, press play and pick up where we left off. Now, there's one more exercise that I'd like us to take us through, and that is thinking about gratitude. Now, many of us know about gratitude, and if you're already doing it, fantastic, good for you. For those of us who may not know about the research around gratitude or have thought about it but haven't started, here's something that we want to look at. And that is, there's just been lots and lots of research about how gratitude is a great way to teach your brain to scan for positive events. So remember when I said that, neurons that fire together wire together? This is the exact same thing here. And what we found is that by getting your brain to think about the things you're grateful for, then it teaches your brain to start looking for those things. And here is the key. We want to think of at least 3 things a day. At least 3 things a day. And we want them to be specific and attach meaning to it. Significant And the significance of this is that what we found is that when you're just general, um, I'm so glad that it's nice weather outside. It doesn't bring up a lot of meaning for your brain. It's just this general thing. But when we get very specific and attach meaning, I'm so grateful that it was such a beautiful sunny day outside because I got to go out for a fantastic walk. Now our brain has attributed meaning to this, and along with that comes the emotion that gratitude brought, which helps to solidify in your brain why it's so important and why we want to continue to look for those. So we want the gratitude to be very specific, and we want it to be attached to meaning, and we want to do at least 3 of them so that our brain gets used to scanning for this. And here's the thing, the research has found that if we do this for just 21 days, that there's going to be significant changes in our perceptions, meaning that we're actually going to be finding more things to be grateful for, which lifts up our spirits and our positivity. And here's what else they found is that when we're feeling happy or when we're feeling positive, it actually increases our productivity by an average of 31%. So, you know how we say, oh, I wish I had more time or I wish I'd be able to get more done? Just by doing gratitude to increase our positivity and scan for those positive things out there actually boosts our productivity overall in all areas. It's not just one single area. So this is really, really great news. In addition to that, if you want to turbocharge that impact, journal or write down your gratitude and visualize what happened when you're doing it. Because our brain doesn't know the difference between seeing a picture or a memory and experiencing the same thing, that it still gives us those endorphins, right? Like serotonin, and it gives us that feeling of positivity, and we get even more of a boost out of it. Now, if you want to maintain this level, then do the gratitude every single day. We're talking about here about 2 minutes, and it's called a 2-minute disruptor. And what it does is it's disrupting our biological driven brain to look for negative things to actually rewire it to look for that positive thing. So 2 minutes a day gives us a great way to get the benefits of being positive and what that can do for us to help reduce the impact of stress on us. So we're going to start wrapping up here. And so here's where I'd like to talk about and summarize what we began with. We started off with the circle of control versus circle of influence and concern. And so just as a reminder, we want to be thinking about what's really out of our control, and to not only let that go if we don't have control over it, like what other people say or do, but really to be thinking about what do I have control over, which is my responses, my behavior, my thoughts, right? And so looking at what we do and staying focused on that. So as I wrap up and we end our time together, here's what I'm going to ask you to think about. And that is, what exercises really stood out for you that shifted or changed your thinking? And then based on this exercise, where do you want to start? Where do you want to stop? Or what do you want to continue to do? So for example, there may be something like maybe journaling about gratitude that we're not, or just writing or thinking about gratitude. Let's start at the basic. We want to be thinking about gratitude. So that might be a goal that we want to start. Or we may want to stop something as a goal. For me, I stopped listening to a certain type of news because I want to be informed. So I didn't want to stop listening to all of the news. I just changed and researched what is the news that was factual that would help me stay informed, but not portray all the negative things. Or you can think about a goal to continue. So, for example, maybe I already do gratitude, but I just say it. I'm not journaling it. So maybe I want to continue to do gratitude and tweak it, amp it up a little bit, and start journaling about it. So that's something else to think about as well. And as you're thinking about your goals, some of you are saying, you know what, this is a lot. I'd like to continue to work, or I might want some support. And this is where I'm going to have you reach out to me. I'm always glad to support you. You can send me an email at deidre.harris@teamagreements.com. And I'll be glad to answer that. Or what you can do is just go to the website itself, www.teamagreements.com. At the bottom of our page, you can actually schedule a 30-minute call with me. It's free. I'd love to hear from you, see what you're doing and how I can support you. And this is where I'm going to stop our PowerPoint and say again, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you being here with me today. And I hope that the rest of your week goes well and that we have ways that we can come together and support each other in the future. Have a great day.